It has only been until recently that the medium of film has become synonymous with entertainment. Definitions of cinema were no more than a consumer good for the depoliticized masses. On their way to becoming the most valuable instrument of communication, movies were destined to serve the ideological and economic interests of the corporate owners of the filmmaking industry and global film market, where a majority were from the United States. The cultures of cinema and television play as the dominant media of the 20th century, shaped and reflected by the cultural sensibilities of its eras. Particularly after World War I, we can progressively pinpoint a regulation that imposed itself on the terms of representation depicted, on the behaviors expected of spectators, and on the physical spaces cinema utilized. Western film culture becomes institutionalized and had to challenge the canons of morale, etiquette, and hygiene. Cinema is now a social institution that brings with it a coordinated complex of objects, behaviors, and expectations, all in the service of the system of Western dominance. The most important and recent trauma for the country of Vietnam following the French colonial rule was decades of war and its aftermath against American aggression. How can revolutionary cinema of the global South be possible within the Western dominating system? Does a Vietnamese film from the nation stand a place in the global film market amongst countless American imperialist war films? In 1972, Richard Nixon was re-elected as President of the United States. Later that year, Nixon ordered the bombings, the raids that continued for 11 days, of Hanoi and Haiphong, two cities in northern Vietnam. Consisting of scenes filmed during this imperialist bombardment on Vietnamese soil, Mb Hanoi, also known as the Little Girl of Hanoi, offers a necessary perspective from a young Vietnamese girl whose life and family are affected, and the Viet Minh soldiers and civilians who help her selflessly. Vietnamese director Hai Ninh, born in 1931, acknowledges the struggle for freedom of the people of Vietnam against U.S. aggression in a heartfelt film released in October 1974, a year before reunification and liberation of Vietnam. Cinema becomes a means of controlled media in the service of dominating system of governance. The technology of moving images began as a compilation of images until edited together it creates movement and guides the audience in watching an illusion. With this in mind, the audience enters a different realm of consciousness when they watch a film. Film becomes a reproduction and temporary illusion of a lived reality meant to affect viewers on a deeper level when they enter the consciousness of the movie-watching realm. Viewers may identify with the subject and characters on the screen too strongly that they are susceptible to ideological positioning in favor of the state. It leaves viewers to not think further critically than the impact of the film's storyline and the connection with its characters and the need for self-representation. The apparatus theory recognizes that the rules of imperialist cinema are to serve its place in the industry of capital and further expand Western hegemony, material existence, individualism, and consumerism. In the neo-colonial landscape of the Western and specifically American world, culture, arts, science, and cinema all carry with them a subversion of ideological and political thought. The peoples from colonized lands, including that of Vietnam, but also those of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, all see economic and political structures that have been shaped and deformed within the colonial operations of Western capitalist nations. Vietnam and America war films can only be mentioned far from Vietnam, in areas where it is depoliticized and where it does not lead to revolutionary action. Cinemas from nations of the colonized, such as Vietnam, includes many elements that have been systematically kept out from films like Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, Jacob's Ladder, and almost every American Vietnam War film. In The Little Girl of Hanoi, the term enemy refers to the Americans. The film expresses subtle anti-imperial sentiments where they were framed within the context against its aggressors. A notable scene was the Vietnamese caretaker comforting a crying baby and gently reassuring him that we will take out that bully Nixon. Many American viewers may pass this film on just as a piece of communist propaganda, despite the fact that basically all of US-made films during the time were also capitalist propaganda. Between 1939 and 1979, Western, French, American, British film companies have put out more than 150 Vietnamese-related feature-length films. More than 50 of these works do not portray a realistic view of the Southeast Asian peoples of Vietnam and what was known as Indochina. They often only reference the Vietnam experience and the return of its veterans. The number of Hollywood production films made was around 100 between 1965, when U.S. Marines and troops landed in Da Nang, and 1975, the year of Vietnamese reunification and liberation, when the last Americans left. The cinema of the revolution is one of destruction and construction. The destruction of neo-colonial misinformation created of itself and of the colony, and the construction of the recaptured truth of living realities. Han frees a forbidden truth, releasing the possibility of subversion and realization through the lens of the decolonized camera. The Little Girl of Hanoi is a film that exemplifies the American imperial core and the devastation it has caused to the nation of Vietnam. Standing out as a powerful contrast to the all-American-made war films, the Vietnamese people are portrayed as victims of American war crimes instead of enemies of them. In the foundations of Western domination and of the non-Western world, Orientalism became the corporate institution of dealing with the Orient, by making statements about it, authorizing views of it, describing it, touching it, settling it, ruling it. In short, Orientalism as a Western style for dominating, reconstructing, and having authority over the Orient, Edward Said describes in his book Orientalism in 1978. Stereotypes of the Yellow Peril are only reinforced by American war movies depicting an Orientalist Vietnam. Western film culture fabricates its own identities and constructions of those in the Orient, of Vietnamese people mostly being reduced to the Viet Cong or Vietnamese bodies as a prop in the background for its focus on American soldiers. The Little Girl of Hanoi acts as a required yet rejection of that.